Hey there. According to this, I am live. Thank goodness. Sometimes when I hit the little button, nothing happens. I see a little spinning circle. And with this Mercury retrograde lately, I've had a lot of technical F ups happen. Things with my iPhone, my iPad, laptop. I have a friend. We sometimes exchange voice messages with each other, when there's not time to really talk, we just record something for the other person to listen to. And I recorded about a 15-minute message. It completely got deleted. She texted me and said, I recorded you a 22-minute message. It got deleted. What the heck is going on here? So it's something with Apple, internet. But anyway, Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, um, lunar eclipses, blood moons, God only knows what else is happening up in the stars and the skies. And I get some people go, I don't believe in astrology. I don't believe in that crap. But well, I do. I have too much evidence that does support it. And right now it is kind of a haywire time for technology, communication, um, because it's a Venus retrograde. I've been talking to some people who've been like hearing from their exes that they haven't spoken to for years, or they're going through all kinds of other chaos and cacophony around current relationships and wigging out. And it's like, all I can think of is breathe, just breathe and be calm. And hi, Ward. Thank you for joining. Let's wait for some other people to come on here. Um, think I was on time today, or it was maybe a minute off. I always work up until the last minute. I know that's not the greatest thing to do, but that's also reflective of my personal growth because I've said that when I started doing these shows about, what was it, a year and a half ago or so? Not quite 2 years yet, how I'd be scared to death and I'd be spending all day preparing what am I going to talk about, and subjects and stuff. And I've gone from that to just doing my work. Oh, 5 o'clock, time to go on here and talk with my friends for a while. Um, Hank Ward, thank you for joining. As you can see, Miss Sasha is behind me here on the couch. Um, I didn't take this Afghan down like I usually do when I do the show because I did not want to awaken the little beast here, especially since she has a tendency to come to life during my show, walk across the couch, leech, jump. That happens a lot when I do my show with Whimsy on Tuesdays. But the cute thing is that Whimsy has her own cat, Mila, who also likes to get in on the action. So you just go with it. You can't control a cat. I've tried. I can't put her in another room. You'll hear and pounding and beating on the door, which is not conducive to doing a show either. She lets her presence be known. She's a tiny little, it's reverse here, a tiny little animal. She's about 8 pounds and she feels like a lion or tiger who weighs about 80 pounds. 180 pounds. She has such a presence, such a personality about her that sometimes I'm shocked when I see a photograph of her and I see this little animal about the size of a squirrel. It just doesn't jive with me. Um, but she's a good friend and I love her very much. And when I get some more people in here, I'll talk a little more about her birthday. Miss Sasha turned 10 years old last week. 10 years old. I've had her since she was 10 weeks old. Still remember when I drove down to San Diego. Hi, Kathy. Thank you for joining. Um, I still remember driving down to San Diego from what's that word? Should you say that out loud with her in the room? Oh, she's heard everything. Let's face it. Let's be glad our dogs and cats can't talk because they know all of our secrets. They know everything. They could really blackmail us if they wanted to. But anyway, I got her from a Siamese cat breeder in San Diego. Wonderful lady named Diane Kramer. I mean, just impeccable breeder. There's as you all know, there's a lot of unscrupulous animal breeding, especially these pet store dogs and cats, the ones that come from the notorious puppy mills. And to me, that is just immoral what goes on in puppy mills and the way those animals are bred and the environment they come from. And sometimes they're taken away from their mothers before they're fully weaned. And so their immune systems are already compromised. I actually had that happen to me a couple of times, many, many years ago. I would never buy an animal from a pet store now, but when I didn't know better, um, I had a little Cocker Spaniel puppy. Um, he had had all of his vaccinations. Everything was up to date. And yet, at the age of 9 weeks, he died of parvo. Died. It was just beyond heartbreaking. And I learned a lot about the puppy mills and how it goes for kittens too. Puppies and kittens, they're taken away too soon. They don't get all of the colostrum from mother's milk, everything they need to develop their immune systems, to develop their digestive systems. That's why a lot of those dogs are so sickly, and cats, aside from all of the genetic inbreeding. But anyway, Diane Kramer, just giving her a little plug here if you ever want a Siamese cat. I think you can find her online. I know I was going to talk about this. I would have found what her listing is. I don't even know if she wants a listing because she has so many people coming to her wanting Siamese cats because her cats, she breeds them to be very strong and healthy. She breeds very ethically. She's very careful and she has very high standards, like for when she will allow her kittens to be released and so forth. But anyway, Sasha is 10 years old and she has the energy still of a 10-week-old kitten. And Diane was telling me that sometimes her cats live to be about 20 years old. So Sasha is just even though she doesn't look it right now sleeping, she's only at the halfway point right now. she might she might be my final pet. She might outlive me. I don't know. Anyway, what are some of my comments here? Oh, yes, Kathy saying, oh, happy birthday, Sasha. Oh, don't say the word vet in one animal's companion's presence. Yes, I know. I know all about that. They know. They know. Um, Even if you're just hinting at it, they know. It's the same way. I don't know if you others have noticed this, but dogs and cats always know when you're going away. Like if you're packing your bags, you're going to go on a little trip or something, they're going to be left behind. They know it. They just know it. Oh my God, they're so intuitive and they're so tuned into us and so tuned into our energy. Wow, William Daniels, 98th birthday. Yes, I knew that about. No, I don't really have any stories about them. I mean, I'm well aware. I think they both did the TV show Saint Elsewhere, and I think they both won Emmys. And I think in the same year, one of those rare cases of a husband and wife winning Emmys the same year at the ceremony. But that's just amazing. 73 years, and even though I haven't watched that show in many, many years myself, I know them both to be splendid actors. And wow. And, in Hollywood, not to get into stereotypes or anything, but for show business marriage to last 73 years is, well, miraculous. That's what it is. It's just miraculous. Betty White once said she would always pack in another room from her animal companions. Um, I've always found my pets know anyway. And I've talked to other people who said the same thing. They're smarter and more intuitive than we ever give them credit. Yeah. Um, in fact, Sasha, yeah, I've heard that cats purposely don't want their owners to know how smart they really are. They like to kind of keep some secrets from us. Um, but one of the tip-offs I got how intelligent this cat is, she was being, shall we say, destructive Like Tasmanian devil destructive, like running around. And it was the middle of the night, and I was hearing like lamps falling over. Uh, these pictures on the wall, I am constantly having to straighten them because of her. Things like that is I've heard her in the kitchen late at night. She learned how to open the cabinets, and I'd hear cans being falling to the floor. And I actually caught her in the act with her paw going into the cupboard and pulling the cans out. But I took her and I held her up and I looked her in the eye and I said, "Look, you and I share this home together. This is your home also. And I expect you to start showing some respect for your home." Maybe it's a coincidence, but she started behaving. And for at least a few days after that, but just impeccable behavior, very polite, very considerate, none of her shenanigans. She understood what I said to her, or she got it energetically at least. Uh, but anyway, now they have I have two people here. I don't know if I guess some others will join later, but I was going to show Sasha's official birthday portrait. I don't know how well this is going to show holding up because of reflections, but do you see that? That was taken just a few days ago. I have this silly tradition where every year I get like a donut or a cupcake or something, and I put a numerical candle on it and take a picture. It's more just to document her age, and just have a series of pictures. I'm very big about taking pictures, documenting, keeping albums. I do it all digitally now, but um, this year she entered double digits to buy two candles this time, though the one I will be able to use in subsequent years. um, and no, I'm not one of those crazy, eccentric cat people that throws a party for my cat, a birthday party. No, no, it's all just a picture staged in fun. And I have her documented her entire life like this. And you will note that the candles are not lit. And the reason for that is because I had to balance a cake plate. Yes, this year I got a cake. She doesn't eat it. I eat it. But anyway, I got a cake. So I had to balance a cake plate. I had to hold out a camera, iPhone camera, and a cat. I had to balance a cat, a camera, and a cake. And I was not about to have an open flame on top of all of that to balance. It just was not a good idea. But anyway, that is Sasha's official 10-year milestone birthday portrait. Right, Sasha? Let's see. Check back on my comments here. What the Miss Bartlett and Mr. Daniels once said that he's amazed their marriage survived the first decade. Well, I think most people who have ever been married or in a long-term relationship will say the very same thing. Uh, longest I ever lasted in a relationship was 7 years. I don't know if I'll ever reach that point again. Is Sasha getting a special birthday treat? Well, no. I petted her a lot. That was that. I played with her. I petted with her, but no. Um, like like I said, the cake was more a prop that I would eat later. That's supposedly not good for cats to give them that type of thing, and she wouldn't eat it anyway. She's very particular, as all cats are. But I can never get her to eat sweets or anything. She will eat things that have dairy, like ice cream. But that's about as far as it goes. Oh, I guess I could have given her a spoonful of ice cream for her birthday. Do they make catnip cakes? I guess so. I mean, I've seen those dog bakeries. I used to see one when I used to go to Pasadena a lot, where they would make homemade dog biscuits and treats and things. I don't know. I think they did cat things too. Uh, Very overpriced, elitist, and sure the animal can truly care less. It's like when I go into Petco or something and I see all these fancy little cat toys and things, and everything in there is absurd overpriced, not to impugn Petco. I'm not doing that, but yeah, but this is true. I find for almost any pet store, everything is like 3 times what it should cost. And frankly, Sasha would rather have a watered up ball of paper or like a little bread wrapper or something twisted around thrown on the floor. She's just as happy with something like that. And I think those little store toys are more for us than they are for the pet, with the little googly eyes on them and the feathers and things like that. Hey, Chris, thank you for joining. Did you ever meet Wesley Uri? No, no, I didn't. I think he did the one man show called Buyer and Seller. I think that's the same Wesley Uri. Um, it was a wonderful I didn't see it on stage, but it played here in LA. It got rave reviews. It was a huge hit, played for months, but I didn't go. I think it was because the tickets were outrageously expensive, like something like $75 or something. I thought, I'm not paying $75 for a one-man show. No, but I did get to see it because it was during the pandemic lockdown of 5 years ago. Remember that? We were all homebound and afraid to step out of our doors because of the plague, and I mean, really, it was we tend to block out bad memories, but it was about 5 years ago this time. Nobody was leaving their homes, except for bare essentials like to grab some groceries or something, and even then we'd have our mask on and our gloves, and we were worried if that we might be bringing a Trojan horse virus home in our groceries. So we were having to take them at the door. And I mean, there was a period where we were having to like have disinfectant and wipe everything down. Well, anyway, a lot of entertainers were doing special things on the internet, just to keep people happy. And Wesley took his one man show about buyer and seller and performed it. It was I think he did it as a benefit, where you could make donations to Broadway Cares because the pandemic had put all the actors out of work, all the Broadway actors, all the theaters were shut down. So he was doing it to help. And the play is so very funny. I don't know if there's a recording of it on YouTube now. If it is, I highly recommend it. It's an embellished version of what it would be like to work for Barbara Streisand as one of her personal assistants. And this case, Barbara Streisand in real life, she has this compound in Malibu with like 2 or 3 mansions built side by side. Hey, when you got that kind of money, you can, you do it, so she basically built her own little world, and I guess I can understand that when you're someone like Streisand, you can't very well get out into the public so easily. It's like Michael Jackson. He built his own little world for himself. In his case, he built his own amusement park. He had his own zoo. He had like a little train track like at Disneyland. Again, he had the money to do that on his estate. Well, anyway, Barbara, in one of the houses in the basement, she built a shopping mall. No, not a real life shopping mall, but kind of like a fantasy play shopping mall, with a cobblestone street and little gas lights and beautiful little store windows, kind of like in England or something. Like one of her stores is like a doll shop, and then she has another shop with antiques and another one with vintage clothing. And I guess she just likes to go down there and play act or whatever. Or she throws parties. I don't know what she does with it. But anyway, Wesley here did this play where he was hired to manage her downstairs shopping mall. And it's just so well written and so well acted, so funny. In fact, wickedly funny. Um, it never has been confirmed if Barbara Streisand ever saw it, but I heard from one of my friends here in LA that her son Jason was sent to go see it and report back to mama. So I don't know what his report was, and I don't know what Barbara thought of it, but I hope she has a sense of humor about herself because it's good-natured fun. Anyway, that's about as far as my connection goes with him, Chris. I've never met him, but but he's quite talented. Let's see. Let me check some comments here. I always thought it was cool. I still had to work in the hospital the whole time. Oh, war. I'm so sorry. You know, I got to tell you, I really, really admire you for that. I admire anybody who was doing that. Those were the real heroes, and you were putting yourself in the line of fire. So thank you, thank you for. I mean this. Thank you for your service. Let's see. What was this here? Chris, he was best friends for a year with Richard Chamberlain. No, I didn't know that. And of course, that is topical. Mr. Chamberlain just passed away yesterday, one day before his 91st birthday. And no, I never met him, though I did find out only today that, when I used to live in West Hollywood for many years, and there was this restaurant, it's gone now, but it was called Basics, which I adored. It's one of my favorite places to go. And I did not know that Richard Chamberlain used to go there a lot. I used to see celebrities, but I never saw him. And let's see, Richard Chamberlain. I should have known people would ask me about that today, and I don't know. Really have a lot of information. I remember my mother loved Dr. Kildare. That I remember. That was a TV show he did back in the early 60s. She's a big fan of that. And of course, he was the king of the miniseries for a while back in the 1980s, like Shogun. And one that I loved was The Thornbirds. Oh my God. At the time that was on, I was working nights, so I couldn't watch it when it aired. But this was 1982 or something, very early 80s, 82, 83, something like that. I was one of the first people to have a Betamax. Not VHS, Beta, which was not a smart move. But anyway, I had a video recorder. So I recorded all of the Thornbirds. And then when it came time to watch it, because I think it was like 5 hours total, I had never done this before. I treated it like a book where I'd pop the tape in, I'd watch maybe 20 minutes of it, or I'd watch an hour of it, or sometimes I'd watch 5 or 10 minutes of it, but it was like picking up a book and just going through it. But I did find it enthralling. And of course, what I really loved about that was Barbara Stanwyck. Richard Chamberlain, of course, was wonderful. He was a good, solid, dependable actor. One of those actors you could always count on to give a good performance, and he was typically very good. In this case, he was a priest, in love with this younger woman, and I don't want to ruin it for you if you haven't seen it. But anyway, Barbara Stanwyck, of course, played a much older woman who also had a bit of a crush on the priest. Oh my God. In fact, Barbara Stanwyck won an Emmy for it. It was like her last great, great performance. And I mean, it was great. It was right up there with anything she did in her youth, like Double Indemnity or Stella Dallas or anything like that. I remember the moment, and I think the clip is on YouTube, where she grabs Richard Chamberlain, the priest, and gives him a big kiss on the mouth. And she confesses her feelings. And it's a beautiful monologue where she's talking about, I'm paraphrasing it horribly, but she's talking about, I'm an old woman, but I'm still young inside and I still have desires and feelings. And then she goes, yeah, I know I'm going to burn in hell for this, and I don't care. Yes, I know it sounds like bad soap opera dialogue, but coming from Miss Stanwyck, it was masterful and it was moving. And I still remember it all these years later. It's awesome. And also another story about Richard Chamberlain, and this is a little more personal, though it's not really direct. Um, I was very close, I've mentioned this before, with the writer Bart Andrews. He and I worked together on a book on I Love Lucy. We were not successful because of a lot of politics, CBS, the publisher. It's very hard to do nonfiction these days. So we didn't publish the book. But anyway, I also worked alongside him because he was a literary agent, very successful literary agent. And I've told these stories before. We would sometimes get submissions like between 100, 200 a week. You know, he taught me how to read a manuscript quickly and determine if it was worth pursuing or toss it aside. And I've told there's a reason literary agents have like a 98 to 99% rejection rate. Most of the stuff we got was really, really bad. I mean, I'm talking like junior high school level writing, and people would submit their manuscripts all wrapped up in tissue and boxed so carefully and lovingly, like they were entrusting us with the great American novel. I've written the next War and Peace. I've written the next Gone with the Wind. It was almost that was in the cover letter. It's like how they saw it. And it was heartbreaking to read how amateurish and bad a lot of the writing was. You know, you had to be tough in situations like that when you had so many manuscripts. But anyway, we had this one manuscript submitted to us. This woman claiming it was a big expose on the real Richard Chamberlain. And apparently, what a horrible, horrible man he was, and a creep and abuser. And I don't have to go into all the stuff. It was just awful. And it was so defamatory. And and it was badly written. You know, that was the first tip off that this was not, but there was something you could just feel the energy of a very disjointed woman, someone who was not right in her head. And it was creepy enough that Bart wrote a letter to Richard Chamberlain to warn him that there was this woman out trying to sell a book on him. And Richard Chamberlain, we got a reply back like 3, 4 days later. I think he was living in Hawaii at the time. So, I mean, we got a quick response, a beautiful handwritten letter from Richard Chamberlain. And he was so gracious in thanking us. And he said, yes, uh, quote unquote, my people have been well aware of this woman. And unfortunately, there's not much we can do about these. I remember his term, these literary loonies. But I want to thank you so much for your consideration. I mean, it was just really gracious. But, you know, and this is what a lot of famous people have to deal with, these crazed fans and their tricks. In this case, she was trying to get back at him for whatever reason she had, other than maybe her sick, twisted mind, with this poison pen manuscript. Better check. Anyway, that's my association with Richard Chamberlain, as little as it is. Let me check some other comments here. Mr. Yuri claimed that the chain he wore on Land of the Lost had been a gift from Mr. Chamberlain. Read what you want from that. Oh, well, both actors are openly gay. You know, that's no secret. So I don't know whether they had a relationship or not. That's their business. Kate, howdy, neighbor. Hi, thank you for joining. It means a lot. And yeah, I have people in my own neighborhood who are Los Feliz watch the show, and occasionally I get to run into you and meet you, and it's delightful. Let me check other comments here. Let's see. Ward Miss Streisand gave a tour of said basement. Oh yes, yes, of course she did. CBS Sunday Morning. Yes, I saw that. I think she's given several tours of that basement, and she has a book that she wrote about a decade ago called My Passion for Design, where after she finished her latest mansion in the collection on the compound, she did this big picture book. And I thought, Barbara, you're shrewd. This way, you can write off a lot of the expenses as a tax deduction, a business expense by doing this book, all the money you spent building this house, documenting it. I don't know. I can't say that for fact, but that's kind of my guess. Nice little tax write-off. But the book is fascinating because she did her own photography, and it's very extensively documented, her downstairs shopping mall. And and I laugh how Michael Jackson, he was basically a little boy in a man's body, so he builds himself a theme park and a zoo, and Barbara, and I say this very, very respectfully, but Barbara, the Jewish princess version, a shopping mall. And please don't get on me for stereotypes or anything. I say that out of love because any of you who know me know I love Barbara Streisand. I'm a major fan of hers. In fact, I mentioned on the show that I've met almost all the celebrities I want to meet except Meryl Streep, Julie Andrews, and top of my list is Barbara Streisand. And then I think I could sell my clothes and go to heaven, as Robin Williams once said. Now, I've seen all three of those women on stage. I've seen them in person, so to speak. I've just never met them. Yes, and before you say, "Well, how did you see Meryl Streep on stage?" I've told the story. It was a Q&A session at a screening for Little Women at the Directors Guild here. They do these screenings here a lot. See, here in LA, we don't go to the movies, we go to screenings. But it was a screening where the stars of the movie came out, and Meryl Streep wanted to be there to give support to her fellow co-stars and her director, and she was just lovely and wonderful. But I was sitting there thinking, I'm breathing the same air in the room as Meryl Streep. I want to meet her. Let's see some other comments here. Oh yes, Towering Inferno. Mr. Chamberlain was in that. William Holden. You know, I never saw that movie when I was a kid. I never saw it for many years. I was very much aware of it, of course, but I did not see it until maybe 3 years ago. I think it was on Amazon Prime, and I'm lucky, I have this big 65-inch, 4K television, so yeah, I know it's decadent, but it's as good as watching a movie in your living room. It's like being in a movie theater when you've got the sound system and everything. So I finally got to see Towering Inferno for the very first time, but I did get to see it in the big widescreen and everything, and I loved it. And it was also intriguing because one of my favorite movies from that era is the movie Network. Patty Chayefsky's Network, and William Holden and Faye Dunaway were in that one the next year. And of course, they played ill-fated lovers. A lot of that had to do with the fact that he was a lot older and married, and her character was a raging narcissist. It's well done, a very well done movie. Faye Dunaway won a Best Actress Oscar for it. William Holden was nominated, and of course, um, Peter Finch won Best Actor posthumously, and Beatrice Straight got Supporting Actress for a 5-minute scene, the shortest performance ever to be awarded an Oscar, and what a 5 minutes it is. It's like, whoa. It's the scene where she finds out about she's the wife of William Holden, and she finds out about the affair, and she lets him have it. Whoa. Let's see, where's some other comments here? Chuck here, Miss Burnett's story about her encounter with Stanwyck in a dentist office. No, Lord, I haven't, but I'd love to hear it. I've talked to people who met Barbara Stanwyck, and I have heard nothing but the most lovely things about that woman. I've heard she was so gracious, thoughtful, and kind. Um, Closest I have to anything personal to tell about Barbara Stanwyck is, I in my hallway, I have a huge collection of old Hollywood signed photos, contracts, things like that, memorabilia. Basically, it's the Hollywood Museum in my home. But this was when I knew my friend Al Morley, who had a memorabilia store on Melrose across from the Pacific Design Center in West Hollywood. If any of you know that area, he had a wonderful memorabilia shop. That's how I first learned it was possible to own things like this. And he had connections. He knew how to get signed pieces, and I was trying to build mine, and I got Barbara Stanwyck's address, and I sent her a photo with a self-addressed stamped envelope for return, and I thought I had it, and I took it to show him, and I said, "I'm sorry, that's not real." I said, "Really?" He said, "Oh, well, I know for a fact she uses secretaries, but I happen to know her secretary. Get me another picture, and I'll get you the real deal." And he did. And Barbara Stanwyck's a beautiful picture from her from the 1940s, not kind of around that Double Indemnity time, even though she's not wearing the blonde wig, but it's very 40s Barbara Stanwyck. And she inscribed it to Chuck and all good wishes and everything like that. And then she included a second picture of herself present day that was also inscribed to me and signed. And that one I gave to my sister. But what a sweet thing to do. But let's see, Chuck here, George Bernard Shaw answer, a would-be writer? I'm not sure if I know what you mean there. A would-be writer? I'm not sure if I understand. Maybe you can tell me more. Well, let's see here. She had wrapped up her favorite part of the work and then saw it hadn't been open. When he returned the manuscript rejecting it, he replied, "You don't have to eat the whole egg to know it's rotten." Oh, okay, I know what you mean. Yeah, well, you're referring to when I was helping my friend, the literary agent. Yeah, well, I've told this before, but Bart taught me. No, I mean, I know we should read more than this, but when you've got 200 manuscripts, you've got to be quick and expedient. So he taught me, if the first line is not completely compelling and pulls you in, toss the manuscript. Or he said, tell you what, sometimes if you feel compelled, go ahead and read the first paragraph or so. But if it does not grab your attention right off the top, that does not speak well for the book, and you might as well toss it to the side. So that was our criteria. That's at least his criteria, and I suspect that was the criteria of a lot of literary agents to this day. Let's see. Oh, yeah, and oh, no, I'm very familiar. Streisand's first TV special from Bergdorf Goodman's department store. I have watched that special so many times. I originally had it on VHS. I had it back in the '80s. I had a bootleg copy of it, but before it had been released publicly. That's how I saw it for the first time, but it has subsequently been released on DVD, which I have, and it's been on Amazon Prime. And, to me, a special like that is almost like a beloved album, like a CD or a record album where you can just play it over and over and over, only you have the wonderful visuals. But that special is magnificent. In fact, it won a whole bunch of Emmys. Barbara Streisand won her first Emmy for that. It got the Emmy Best Special of the Year, and of course, it was in black and white. And of course, next year she did Color Me, Barbara. First color special. What was this? During the National Enquirer fiasco, Miss Stanwyck came up to Miss Burnett and said, "You are going to win." Miss Burnett politely thanked her, but Miss Stanwyck said she wasn't just giving her what cut off. I don't know what the rest of the statement was. It cut off after wasn't just giving her, but I think I know what you mean. Yeah, and I remember that lawsuit against the National Enquirer. And I also told I've met Carol Burnett 3 times. She is a lady, a great lady, a lady of wonderful integrity and character and heart. And she sued the National Enquirer purely out of principle because they ran a story implying that she was a drunk, that she was drunk in a bed. She was like a sloppy drunk, like she was just acting badly and all. And well, Carol was horrified. Like she would never behave like that. But what really got her, see, both of her parents died of alcoholism. So that really touched a nerve with Carol Burnett, and she sued, and I remember that. She said, "I don't care if all I get awarded is $1 and car fare home. I wanna make my point," and she did. She did. Oh, yeah, Kate, An Earthquake. Oh my god, that's another one. Now that's one I did see when I was a kid. Now, when I was a kid, I thought it was just incredible. Ooh, Sense Around. Remember, there was this thing called Sense Around. It was the novelty. It lasted about 3 movies before it mercifully died, where they put these big subwoofer speakers in the movie theaters, and it was coordinated with the movie for when the earthquake would happen or the tremors would happen. The whole theater would start rumbling and shaking and booming. And I read accounts of some theaters, they actually had plaster falling down from the ceiling. They had damage from it. But I thought, oh, I was a kid. That was just cool. Well, I watched that. Speaking of Amazon Prime, there's just a whole treasure trove of movies on there. Earthquake was on there. And the last time I had seen it, oddly enough, was in Paris. Not in the theater, it was on television in Paris back in the 80s, and it was dubbed in French. Now, the movie was already becoming very, very campy. So to see this bad movie and this bad dialogue being translated into French just made it all the more absurd. But yeah, I watched that recently on Amazon. I was, oh my God, this is bad. It's bad. I mean, even the special effects that we thought were so incredible back then looked so cheesy. Like the houses coming down, things you could tell they were like cardboard models and things like that. And you could see their little toy cars and like little matchbox cars or something falling down. It was just really, really cheesy. But yes, Lauren Green, who was like, what, 5 years older than Ava Gardner, was playing her father, and I remembered I watched that. I was oh, I don't wanna impugn Miss Gardner because love Ava Gardner. She was beautiful, wonderful actress, wonderful screen presence, but I don't think this was one of her finer moments on screen, and, I know she and Charlton Heston had worked before in a much better film. I forget what it was called years before in the '60s, but they did not have too much chemistry in this movie. And maybe that was intentional because his character was um seeing this much younger, cuter woman. I think it was Genevieve Bujold who played her. I can't remember. But um I remember in Earthquake he had a dilemma. Charlton Heston had a dilemma when the next big quake came and they were all like in a sewer or something caught in the water. And his little mistress was on one side and his wife was on the other side. And he had to make a choice. Which one do I save? And he saved Ava, but ended up getting swept down the sewer pipe with her. Anyway, uh, anyway, what's this? Ward, it says, can you read the rest now? What's it? She then claimed her leper. Oh, wait, here we go. Then she then claimed her leprechaun had been with her from her early days and had never been wrong. Oh, what a sweet thing to say. What a sweet thing to say. And I know Carol, that probably meant a lot to Carol personally because Carol Burnett long before she was ever famous. She was a little girl in growing up in downtown Hollywood, and she was being primarily raised by her grandmother. She called Nanny. They, I think, they were on welfare at certain times. They were very poor, and little Carol Burnett and her grandmother used to go they'd go to Hollywood where there were all the movie theaters, and that was Carol's escapism. All the great movie stars, Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, Clark Gable, said her all-time favorite was Betty Grable. And then, of course, people like Barbara Stanwyck, and that's why on the Carol Burnett show, she used to do all those old movie takeoffs. But these were her heroes. In fact, there's a lovely clip of Carol Burnett you can find on social media and YouTube. It was her very last show in, the series back in the '70s. And Tim Conway prepared a surprise for her, a surprise guest. And the curtain came up and it was Jimmy Stewart. And it's beautiful. Carol started crying. And she hugged her and said, "You don't know what this means to me." Because Jimmy Stewart had been her all-time favorite actor. And she said one of the reasons she loved Jimmy Stewart so much is because he looked just like her father, the father who died of alcoholism. And so she felt almost like he was a surrogate father to her on the screen. And so it's a beautiful moment when they meet. Let's see. Hey, Danny, thank you for joining. Let's see. Ever see Meteor with Natalie Wood? I know of the movie, but I've never seen it. But I do know of it. I remember when it came out. But yeah, it's one thing to see a good movie dubbed, but when it's like a really bad, campy movie and the dialogue in English is so bad, and you're hearing it in a foreign language. But I never forget being in Paris and seeing Earthquake. Let's see here. Thinking of dubbed movies. Oh yes, The Lone Ranger with Clinton Spilsbury. Apparently, Clinton's voice was so bad it was dubbed by Stacy Keach's brother James. Yes, I did hear that. Well, more than hear that. If I recall, when the movie came out, the studio didn't even try to hide the fact. They just flat out said that his voice had been redubbed, which of course destroyed Clinton Spilsbury's career. But I think his thinking was his career was already destroyed anyway. Apparently, he was very, very bad in the movie. If I haven't seen it, but I understand he was like a very handsome, like GQ model type who looked the part. But that's about as far as it went. They put the Lone Ranger mask on him and the cowboy hat, but he just apparently could not act his way out of the proverbial paper bag. There was a story also, I think it was one of the Tarzan movies from the 80s, not the Bo Derek one. Oh, God, you want to see a bad movie? Bo Derek's Tarzan. Just trust me, if you want to see something like, you just sit there like, how did this get made? How did this get financed? It's so awful. But anyway, there was another Tarzan movie, and Andy McDowell, who did go on to have a little bit of a successful film career, but she has like a southern twang in her voice, and they when they watched the first cut of the film, it just didn't work for her character. I can't remember, she was playing an English noblewoman or something, but anyway, her voice was all wrong. So they had Glenn Close redub all of her dialogue. And I remember Andy McDowell was understandably very upset when word got out about that, because it could have ruined her career. It was very humiliating for any actor for that to happen. Let's see. Oh yes, Kate, I know that story about Carol Burnett. Her family was so poor that about stealing toilet paper from the movie theaters. Well, it went much further than that. And Carol told this story on Larry King, here in LA, on Sunset and Fairfax. There was at the time a thrifty drugstore, the old fashioned drugstore, where you actually had the soda fountain counter, ice cream and get malts and things like that. Once upon a time, those of us old enough can remember that. And she and her grandmother used to go to the soda counter at Thrifty's, and they brought a big purse. And Carol was laughing about this, but Nanny, her grandmother, would take all the silverware, not just theirs. She'd go around the counter taking the silverware, and then she'd take the napkins and straws, the salt and pepper shakers, and I don't know what else they took. And then they'd make a trip to the ladies' room where they would go to each of the stalls, taking the toilet paper from each stall. And Carol said, well, we were set for the week. And then Carol said, I'm probably going to have to write a check to Thrifty now. I'm admitting this on television. And she also wrote about it in her autobiography. In fact, speaking of her first autobiography, it's wonderful. It's called One More Time. One More Time, like the old show business saying, one more time. That's where she got that from. And she said it was because she had told her 3 daughters all these stories of her life, and the daughters would like, "Oh, tell it again, mom, one more time." So that's what she called her autobiography. I later got Carol to sign it for me, but in her autobiography, she tells the story. It's a very moving book, telling about her impoverished childhood and her dreams and the loss of her parents to alcoholism. And there was it talk at one time of making it into a movie, or at least a TV movie, and Carol Burnett was gonna play her own grandmother, and I was just so sorry that never materialized. I would have loved to have seen Carol Burnett's performance playing her beloved grandmother. As only she would have ever been able to have done it, and there was even a physical resemblance. It was just I see how they would have made her up for the role and everything. I Carol's 91. I don't know if she could still do something like that. I know she's had a Oh, there was some show, sitcom or something, I think on Apple TV. Why am I blanking on the name of it? Brain fart here. But she was, I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard wonderful things. She got an Emmy nomination for it at the age of 91. In fact, she and Meryl Streep were nominated in the same category because Meryl Streep was doing only Murders in the Building, and Martin Short and Steve Martin. And by the way, Meryl and Martin are dating now. I've They've come out. They're the most adorable couple. It's one of those unexpected couples, but they just look so right together. But anyway, they were both nominated in the same category, Best Supporting Actress on a Television Comedy. And it was only a few days before that. Um, she was being interviewed for an Emmy special, Carol Burnett. And the question was, is there anybody left that you would like to work with? And Carol Burnett said, I want to work with Meryl Streep. And she said Meryl Streep would be wonderful with a variety show type of thing. She does comedy, she can sing. I would love to work with her. And the reporter took the iPad, showed it to Meryl Streep, and they recorded Meryl's reaction. And Meryl was so touched. And she looked in the camera and said, Carol, I'm available. So I hope that happens. When I saw them together at the Emmys, I thought, I hope they got together during the commercial break, talked about something. Meryl and Carol, or Carol and Meryl, or whatever. It's got to happen. I hope it does. Let's see. Where's some other comments here? Oh, I better scroll back here. Yes, yeah, about Miss Close dubbing Miss Doll's part. Yeah. I've eventually figured out the lady teacher, now deceased in 2018, had an affinity for sixth graders, not just myself. Oh, no, no. What is that, Danny? What are you speaking of? Oh, yeah. About, I think you're referring back to what I was saying about the Thornbirds and Barbara Stanwyck, with someone much younger. Yeah, but at least in that case, they were both adults. No, that's unconscionable. A teacher going after the sixth graders. There is an amazing movie with Kate Blanchett and Judi Dench called Notes on a Scandal that actually is about that. Well, there's more than just that in it, but Kate Blanchett's character, they're both women are high school teachers. And Kate Blanchett's character is having an affair with her 15-year-old student, and it's every bit as disastrous as you can imagine. And I have a very good friend in Barcelona who's a high school teacher, and he had stories to tell me. He said you would not believe. He's very well behaved. Very proper. Would never go there, but he said he's had sexual propositions from his teenage students, boys and girls. And he said what was really bad, the mothers, like at the PTA, the equivalents of the PTA meetings. I don't know if they call them that in Spain, but parent teacher conferences. He said he got hit on by the mothers too. And he said, I'm strong. I behave myself. I have character, but I know some teachers who have gone down that path. And I told him, watch Notes on a Scandal. And I said, if you do, you will see it is every high school teacher's worst nightmare come true. So, Let's see here. Wait, Danny, it took me years to forgive the teacher for the abuse I suffered at her hands, which I should clarify is similar to the abuse Jay North suffered at the hands of his aunt and uncle. Yeah, I had I don't real it's not really what I want to do with the show talking about this so much, but I did have some emotionally abusive teachers in grade school. It did some definite damage. I had to do some therapy, particularly over a fifth grade teacher. Just unconscionable. A very bitter woman. I'm convinced she was bipolar. I don't think she was getting help. I also know it was her last year of teaching. She was going to retire, and she was just over it. She did not want to be there. She was fed up with all the kids and everything, and she took it all out on us. And it's just never fair. It's never right. Anyway, Danny, I'm so deeply sorry you had to go through that. And I hope I'm not making light of it in any way, shape, or form. And yeah, Jay North. I had a friend who knew Jay North, and I can't remember specifics what he was told. Um, other than my friend said that he he was abused as a child, and so many of those child stars, they it sounds cliche to say this, but yeah, they had their childhoods robbed from them. They're kids like Jay North, many others, they were expected to behave like adults. 5, 6, 7 years old. They were expected to behave professionally like an adult and work adult hours. And sometimes that was like 6 days a week, like early morning till late at night. Yes, I know about child labor laws and that type of thing, but they get around things like that. It gets abused all the time. And I've spoken to people who were child stars, said even though you have a tutor on the set and you're supposed to get 3 hours of schooling in between everything else, they said, no, they did not get educated properly, and few went back to school, and there are some who survived it and did well. Friend of mine, went to high school with, Erin Murphy, who played she and her twin sister, played Tabitha on Bewitched. And, Aaron was according to my friend, Aaron was very well adjusted. She was one of the luckier of the child stars. She was treated well. Her parents actually took care of her money instead of spending it all, which we've heard those stories. Um, I think she was treated well. She spoke glowingly of like Elizabeth Montgomery, and she said Agnes Moorehead, played her grandmother on the show, basically was like her grandmother in real life. She would take her and her little sister when they weren't filming and read, have like a nice children's book, and they'd be in their dressing room and they'd sit in her lap and she would read to them. Said she was just sweet and nurturing as could be to them. And I remember a long time ago, I saw a talk show. It was like one of those things like, what was it, Sally Jesse Raphael or Jerry Springer's, which I don't like. I never liked those shows, but we've all been guilty of catching them if nothing else is on TV. And I remember they had a panel of former child stars, and she was on there, and I forget who the others were, but I think it was her and four others or something like that. And the other four had the most tragic stories to tell and about all the abuse and everything, and how their mother and father went through all their money and nothing was left, and addictions and so forth. And then Erin Murphy, she was almost embarrassed because she didn't have any stories like that to tell. And everyone was saying how they lost their money. And then it came to her, well, now, Erin, what did you do with your money? And she was almost sheepish. And she goes, well, I invested it. Like she was embarrassed to say that. I invested it, and and I see her today on Facebook, and she's, oh my goodness, she's beautiful. She's in her early 60s now. She's a grandmother now, and she writes wonderful postings about the show, and she seems to be really together. And I did meet her once. I forgot. I did meet her once. It was at a book signing, Dawn Wells, who played, Mary Ann on Gilligan's Island. I've told the story how I met Natalie Schaefer and I met Tina Louise. So I purposely went to the book signing so I could complete my set. Be able to say for the rest of my life, I met all three of the women of Gilligan's Island. Ha ha ha. But I even told her that, and she thought that was funny. And I said, I'm here to complete my set. Anyway, Erin Murphy is was a good friend of Dawn's, and she was there to give support. And I met her just briefly, and I said, "Well, I have a friend. He went to high school with you." And I showed his picture on the phone. She did not remember him at all. I had to break the news to my friend. She didn't remember him, but he was okay with that. He understood. It was a long time ago. Let me see. Check some other comments here. Yeah, I tell you, Danny, I'm looking at your comment again. I could really, if I want going, I could do a very serious show about that, some of the abuse I went through with teachers and other people I know, and maybe I would do that, but I would do it separately. This is a show I try to keep a little lighter and more fun about entertainment and show business. But let me see here. Yeah, let me go on here. Let's see. Wait, Danny, when they were his legal guardians after his father's divorce when Jay was very young. Oh, his aunt and uncle. Yes. Okay. Well, yeah. Yeah. I hear stories like that all the time. And then, I am reminded of, oh, what was her name? Lauren Chapin? Is that her name? It was the famous sitcom in the 1950s, Father Knows Best. She was the youngest, the one called Kitten, Little Kitten. Her life was quite tragic. She was at one point prostituting herself. She had a serious drug addiction. But she told the story that all of her earnings from Father Knows Best had been put into a trust fund that she could not access until she was 18 years old. Well, the weekend she turned 18, she cashed out her entire trust fund and got in a car with some friends and went to Vegas. And according to her, went through all of her money in one weekend. Every penny she had made on Father Knows Best, she went through it all. And no, that's a tragic story, and that's something where she did it to herself. Let's see here. Did I ever meet Alan Hale Jr.? I wish I had. I wish I had. He, in West Hollywood, where I used to live, he had a restaurant called Alan Hale's Lobster Barrel, and I never went there. And I understand he was there, he'd wear his skipper hat, and he would act like the host. He would be the actual host, greet you and seat you, and he'd come to your tables and talk to you. And this was a man who really relished being the skipper. He loved it. And from all accounts I've heard, he loved people, just a warm, gregarious man. Um, which I'm thinking is the antithesis of Tina Louise. And you've all heard the stories about her. Now, God bless Tina Louise. She is 91 years old now, just turned 91. In fact, the New York Times did an article about her about a month ago. Because one of her passions is children's literacy. And she goes to schools and she reads to the children and she tutors children, but she does not like to discuss Gilligan's Island. Do not bring that up with her. It's a sore spot. And when I met her, it was when I was in the health nutrition business, and I spent about an hour with her putting together a nutritional program and supplements and so forth. And we got along fine. But Tina was she was all business, even a little bit on the brusque side, not rude, not rude. She's very nice, polite, but brusque, to the point, no small talk. And from the vibe she gave off, I knew not to mention either one of the G words with her because I knew she'd take my head off. She would not have been happy about that. Unlike Natalie Schaefer and Dawn Wells, Dawn Wells very much, like Alan Hale, very much embraced that she was Marianne, that's what she was always gonna be known for. That's what she was gonna be loved for. That's what the public wanted. She knew it and she embraced it. Natalie Schaefer was like that. I've told the story, just for the sake of context, I'll mention it. It was back in 1989 in Beverly Hills. I ran into her in a store, and that dear lady spent almost half an hour with me, just answering my questions about Gilligan's Island, telling me little personal stories. She was so sweet, and she still looked incredible. She still looked like Mrs. Howell. She still looked like Mrs. Howell and the voice. "Oh, I love doing Gilligan's Island." She was just like Mrs. Howell for real, but very unpretentious, very down to earth. In that respect, she was different from Mrs. Howell, but I just loved her. And I just think, wow, I got to go meet Dawn Wells so I can complete my set. And I did. And anyway, that's how I'm getting back to Erin Murphy and Bewitched. And we were talking about child stars, but she was one of the few who came out of it relatively unscathed. It was this here. I better go back here. Oh yeah, or could just picture Alan Hale and a family coming in with the kids, and he called him a little boy, little buddy. And I'm sure he did do things like that. I've seen photographs of him in his restaurant, but I've just heard the accounts of, he was just so warm and loving. And let's face it, I've said this on here many times. Those television stars we grew up with kids really do feel like our family. And I know it's cliche to say, yes, through television, we brought them into our living rooms every week and all, but it's true. It's true. And the really great television stars have always been conscious of that, like how they come across on television. I know Lucille Ball was very conscious of that and very grateful for it. We talked once on this show about Joan Davis, who had a sitcom in the 50s, I Married Joan, which was on NBC, and it was NBC's attempt to copy I Love Lucy. And fortunately, Joan Davis got tagged the poor man's Lucy. But Joan Davis, in her movies and when she'd been involved, she was very, very over the top and raucous and even a little obnoxious. And she knew to tone all that down. She said, it's one thing when you're doing that on stage, but when you are coming into people's living rooms on their TV sets, you're a guest in their home and you act accordingly. And I thought, yeah, that was smart. That was really smart. Let's see here. Wait, I remember reading about Ellen Hale battling cancer, joking to a youngster he was going to play Gilligan in a new Gilligan's Island TV show. Wouldn't that have been adorable? And of course, we know that the Skipper and Gilligan were based on Laurel and Hardy. See the similarities there. And I will confess to being a fan of Gilligan's Island. Yeah, it's like one of those guilty pleasures. I remember my mother used to chide me when I was in high school and I'd watch it in the afternoons, and my mother'd say, someone of your intelligence and you're watching this? I said, yeah. And the show, even when you watch it now, the writing wasn't that good. It was silly, preposterous, but those actors, each actor, I think you would agree with me, they were born to play those roles. Natalie Schaefer as Mrs. Howell, Tina Louise as Ginger, Marianne, everyone was perfectly cast. And they had marvelous chemistry with each other. I think that was the secret of that show. As silly and preposterous as it was, you cared for those people and you loved those people, and those people felt like a family. And there was like an unspoken love between them. Like they became a family, stranded on that island, as silly as that premise was. And, things like that little tiny boat. And supposedly the Howells brought all those trunks and suitcases, and Ginger had all those evening gowns and stuff. I don't know. I know they took a lot of poetic license there, but they made us believe it. We bought it. It's like what Lucy said. I've told the story. Lucille Ball said that the secret to playing Lucy Ricardo, she was asked this in a Q&A with an audience, because admittedly, I Love Lucy had some very cartoonish plots, but you bought it because you believed Lucy. And Lucy said her secret was, I always played her like a little girl who believed everything. I was a child believer. And because I believed it, I made you believe it. You to say more? Let's see here. Oh, let's see what else here. To be fair, despite having been somewhat award. Be fair, despite having been somewhat neglected as a child, Miss Louise herself has been a very devoted parent to her daughter. Yes, Cheryl Crane, a lovely woman who, I think, close to the age of 50, gave birth to twins for the first time. She became a first-time mother, and Tina Louise, in her late 80s, became a first-time grandmother. And I've seen pictures on Facebook of them together, like Christmas time, and that my light is going out here. But I don't know what that's about, but anyway, I've seen pictures of them at gatherings and things. The little boy and a little girl, and it's a side of Tina Louise. It's a very warm side of her to see in those pictures. Um, yes, I read that about Tina, and an autobiography. I think she might have written it actually a few years ago, but it was being um, publicized. I know, I mentioned earlier about the article in the New York Times. I'm not sure when it came out. I know she also did a video interview not too long ago. So maybe the book came out more recently, and I thought, but yeah, I knew she had a sad childhood. Um, and of course, that story about her being, well, my light just died. Thankfully, I still have this light here. Um, Tina Louise was doing a Broadway musical with Carol Burnett at the time, Fade In, Fade Out, it was called, in 1964. And she was approached to star, quote unquote, star in this sitcom on CBS. And it was pitched to her, it was going to be about this movie star stranded on an island surrounded by all these other characters. She thought she was going to be the star of the show. So they get to the table reading, first table reading, and about halfway through, Tina starts to realize, wait a minute, I'm not the star of the show. This is an ensemble. And Natalie Schaefer turned to her and said, oh, what did you think, dear? It's not called Ginger's Island. Anyway, it's my understanding Tina Louise had a chip on her shoulder after that, always. I think she was locked into a contract. She couldn't get out of it. She didn't want to do the show. There's even the story about Natalie Schaefer. She didn't want to do the show initially. They shot the pilot in Hawaii, and Natalie Schaefer thought it would be a wonderful way to get a free trip to Hawaii. So she agreed to shoot the pilot, and she thought, oh, this is so bad. This will never sell. And anyway, she got a phone call from her agent. Well, congratulations, Natalie. The pilot sold. And Natalie said she burst into tears. No. Well, anyway, it worked out. When I met Natalie and I was asking her about the show and everything, Natalie just lit up. She said, I loved doing that show. I loved it. I had so much fun. And all the people like yourself who come up to me, still know me, recognize me. It's beautiful. So yeah, she was happy about it, but Tina not so. Let's see what else we have here in comments. Oh yeah, well, I saw that, but Miss Louise likes to say age is a number, and here it is unlisted. Well, in her interview for the New York Times, she just said, let's just say I'm over 29, or something like that. Where if I had the chance to talk to Tina, I would ask her about her role on Married with Children. I didn't realize she had a role on Married with Children. Now, I do know she did a guest appearance on Roseanne. Oh, it's wonderful, and it's on YouTube. They got her and Dawn Wells and Russell Johnson and Bob Denver to play the characters on Roseanne, and I guess they got Tina to do it by letting her be Roseanne. But it's really cute, and I think it was done in the very early '90s. They all still looked great, still looked like their characters, and the studio audience was going crazy when they were walking out. This keeps moving here. Let's see here. I've got to scroll back here. That's a problem with these comments. They move and then I can't find where I left off. Let me go back. Um, let's see here. I got to scroll way back here. Okay. Oh my gosh. You guys have been leaving me a lot of comments here while I've been talking. Let's see. Um, oh yeah, it's the word you were saying about Eartha Kitt and her daughter. Yeah, I've read they had a good relationship. I always think it's great when folks make an effort to give their kids a far better childhood than they had. Eartha Kitt, I saw her perform live once at the Cinegrill nightclub in Hollywood, which is like a little intimate cabaret. Little tables around the stage, and Eartha Kitt walked around to our tables and sang. That's my special memory of her. Let's see. Let's see. Yes, and Kate, it is true. Natalie Schaefer was always playing high society types. Well, a lot of character actors like her, because she was always a character actress. They were typecast. They had a type. And if they were smart, they capitalized upon it. It's like Billy Burke, who had the great fortune of playing Glinda the Good Witch in The Wizard of Oz. For the most part, her film career was comprised of playing society matrons, usually very daffy and scatterbrained and highfalutin and all. But Billy Burke cashed in on it. She went along with it. That was the reason she came to Hollywood. She had been a great Broadway star in her youth. She was a beautiful ingenue around the turn of the last century. Oh, you see her picture. She was just gorgeous. And she was an ingenue, Broadway. She married Florenz Ziegfeld. Of course, Ziegfeld lost all of his money in the stock market crash. And then he died in 1932. And Miss Burke was in dire need of refilling her bank account. She was not doing well. And so she decided to come to Hollywood and in movies. And of course, she quickly got cast as a society matron thing. But I think she was just grateful to have the work and the money. And then she did get that one iconic role, one of the most iconic roles in the history of motion pictures. And Billy Burke was 54 at the time. The makeup they did on her, I think she probably had like the surgical lifts and things under the wig and stuff. But so what? She was beautiful, beautiful. And Billy Burke said that was her favorite film role because this is the only time ever on screen she got to be like she was when she was a young woman on Broadway as an ingenue. Because in many ways, Glinda was an ingenue. And speaking of that, I mentioned this last week. Wicked is streaming on the Peacock network right now. I never saw Wicked in the movie theater, and my friend Anastasia came over here. That's why I had to rush to get off the air last week. I had to get ready. We loved it. Highly recommend it if you haven't seen it. Beautiful movie, and the chemistry between Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. It's very authentic. If you've seen their interviews, those two women love each other in real life. So that love just came through on screen. One of those unspoken things. It was present. And Cynthia Erivo, what a voice, what a talent. She's going to be performing at the Hollywood Bowl this summer, and I very much want to go see her. but it is controversial, or at least it's going to be controversial. It's been announced, and I'm surprised there has not been more of an uproar about it. Cynthia Erivo is going to play the lead in Jesus Christ Superstar. I don't think the role has ever been played by a woman before, but I'm sure some people are going to be in a bit of an uproar, to have a woman, a black woman, and a woman who also admits she's lesbian, playing Jesus Christ. So I'm wondering what it's going to be like this summer, if there is going to be like some bad press and hostility. I hope not. I hope not, because I'm certain she's going to be magnificent, and I very much plan to be there, to be in the audience for it. Let's see, what are some other comments here? Andy, oh, your mother's in the nursing home now. Oh, I'm so sorry, Andy. I'm sorry to hear that. You've been taking care of her. I had to go through that. My mother never ended up in a nursing home, but she probably should have been. But what happened, she and my father in their early 80s. My father was in very good health, and my mother was stubborn, very stubborn. She would not hear of even having a caretaker come in, to help bathe her or anything. She would not hear of that. So my father had to be her caretaker 24/7. And frankly, it almost killed him. It was just too much for a man of his age. He admitted to my sister and myself that he was sometimes getting 1 hour sleep a night. We were just horrified. But my father, years later, about 6 years later, he ended up in a nursing home for like the last year and a half of his life. Thankfully, my father was well cared for and kept very comfortable and happy. But it's just, um, those are grim places. My friend Bart Andrews, that I've spoken of, I mentioned even at the beginning of the show, he had a debilitating stroke, or it might have even been a series of strokes, but he had to be in a nursing home the last 4 years of his life. And I'd go there to visit him, and it was a very sad place, very sad. And I was told by the workers there that a lot of people never had visitors, including their children. Children would just put their parents away in these homes and then never see them. You know, Awful way to end up. But it's, bless you for what you're going through. And yeah, it is a tough thing to do. It's a tough thing to do. Um, but everybody's situation is different. And for many people, it is a tough thing to do, but it's sometimes the only option. You do what you have to do. Let's see. Danny, Gilligan's Island is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Yeah. I think someone in the comment, oh, yeah, Danny, here it is. You said, I wish Gilligan's Island would be issued on Blu-ray. I don't know. That sometimes there are shows I don't even know they're on Blu-ray until I look them up on Amazon. I'm like, wow, it is available. Um, I don't know. Might be worth a look, but I think it's one of the streaming channels that shows it, and it looks to me like it's been remastered in high definition, like it is Blu-ray quality. That's one way to watch it. I maybe Google search it, just see where it's streaming, because I have seen it look really, really good. And I know Amazon Prime, I I don't know if Gilligan's Island's on there, but Amazon Prime has a number of classic TV shows that are in like Blu-ray high definition, like Dick Van Dyke, the Andy Griffith Show. They look, the prints just pop. They look incredible. So maybe look for it that way. In fact, I am surprised Gilligan's Island hasn't been issued on Blu-ray, because it is one of the most successful shows in the history of syndication. Um, it and I Love Lucy are in a dead heat tie for the longest time in syndication. Actually, I Love Lucy has officially the title of the longest run of any show, because it has literally never been off the air since 1951. But it was in 1967. Because see, in the 60s, CBS used to show it in the morning. So technically, it was still on the network. In 1967, it was released for syndication. Well, that was the year that Gilligan's Island went off the air. It also went into syndication at the same time, and here it is more than 50 years later. It's coming up 60 years or something, still going strong. So it's been a very profitable show. That alone, I would think, would be enough for that show to be put out on Blu-ray, because basically decisions are based on money. So we'll see what happens. Maybe it's out there. Uh, should I check? No, you guys can look it up. It's easy to look on Amazon. I'm bummed with Amazon right now. I was supposed to get a package today, and I got a notice saying it was not going to come until at least 10 o'clock tomorrow night. It's been delayed. I was like, when you're waiting for something. What was that word? I always like that scene with Ginger and Marianne were screaming at each other for what names each of them were thinking, but never spoke. Yes! I remember that. Oh, really? That was cute. You know what my favorite is? The radioactive vegetable seeds. The time Miss and Mrs. Howell ate the radioactive sugar beets, and they speeded up the film, and there's Mrs. Howell going all over the place like the Tasmanian devil. That always cracks me up. It's like shows like that. Yes, it's silly, it's cartoonish, and yes, you've seen it 70 times before, but it still makes you laugh. Uh, and I loved Mrs. Howell. I loved Mrs. Howell because, it was the line. There were several. They would give her these really great, haughty, rich society woman lines, like the time the headhunters were on the island after the castaways, and there's Mrs. Howell doing her hair and trying on hats and earrings. She goes, "Well, if my head is going to be hanging on a post, I want it properly coiffured and chapeaued." And then there was another time the volcano was going to erupt, and somebody asked the professor, "Where's Mrs. Howell?" "Oh, she's still trying to pick out the right kind of diamond for an explosion." Lines like that. Okay, pop quiz. Who was the Jungle Boy? I think that was Kurt Russell, wasn't it? Am I right on that? Kurt Russell played the Jungle Boy on Gilligan's Island. Let me know. Uh, oh yeah, you know who did that? You said Danny said he especially enjoyed the colorized version, the first season. We have Ted Turner to thank for that. When he had I don't I don't keep up with Ted Turner. I don't know if he owns any of the like TBS or anything like that or not. But at the time, Gilligan's Island showed on TBS, and he personally had that first season colorized. And it's such a shame in hindsight that there's that one black and white season, but it had the misfortune. 1965 was the year the networks all switched over to color television, full color schedules for their shows, and Gilligan's Island premiered in 1964. Hence that first year in black and white, and then it switched to color for the other 2 years. And of course, we all know like Andy Griffith Show, there are like 5 seasons are black and white, and then 65 to 68, those last 3 years are in color, and in fact, I understand one of the reasons Carl Reiner decided to end the Dick Van Dyke Show when it did. It ended in 1966. It was one of the last of the black and white shows. That was the year when most programming was in color. And he wanted to keep the show consistent. It was all black and white. Let's just keep it this way for syndication and so forth. And well, it was many reasons he ended the show. He also wanted to go out on top, before the show started getting stale. But that was part of the reasoning. If they stayed on the air another year, they were going to have no choice but to switch over to color. And that was going to mean having to redo all the sets and paint everything and all that and all. And he didn't want to go there. So that was just one thing. I know Rosemary, she said in an interview she felt that show could have gone on for several more years, and she said, "I wish we had gotten to have done it in color." Anyway, yeah, Kurt Russell. Yeah, you confirmed that for me. Hey, Joyce, nothing to apologize for. You're sweet to come on here. Thank you, Joyce. Um, Yeah, as opposed to the black and white prints. Well, also Gilligan's Island, just because of the tropical setting. It was just if ever color served a show, it was that show because of all the flowers and the palm trees and everything, and also I think the color even enhanced the comedy because it was kind of like a comic book or like a Saturday morning cartoon or something. So to have all those bright, vivid colors to me just added to the overall joyous feeling. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and you didn't see Sasha here? I was talking about at the beginning of the show. That's why I didn't take the Afghan down like I usually do, because I didn't want to disturb Miss Sasha's slumber. And Joyce, you missed the part of the show. I tell you what, Joyce, I'll send you the picture. I took every year I take a picture of Sasha with a cupcake or something and a little numerical candle. This year was her 10th birthday, and I actually had a cake with 10 on it, but I'll send you the picture. Yeah, Danny, you were saying, yes, it is true. Tina was professional during the run of Gilligan's Island. That's what people have said. People who worked with her said she was definitely the least popular cast member on that show. She tended to stay to herself, not socialize. She definitely had a chip on her shoulder, not happy doing that show, but everybody was in agreement. She was professional. She signed her contract, she made a deal to do a show, and she did it. And she did it very well. I think we all agree with that. As I said earlier, everybody on that show was born to play their characters. And I think it's a sore spot for Tina Louise. But let's face it, we wouldn't even know who Tina Louise is today had she not done Gilligan's Island. That show gave her, everybody, a career, gave them immortality. Even now, the New York Times, would they be doing an article on her if she had not and people's hearts as Ginger? Any Jim Backus stories? Not I could think of some, I suppose. I never met him. I do know this. When I asked Natalie Schaefer, you could read into this any way you want. I was complimenting her, of course, about how wonderful she was with Jim Backus. And Jim Backus had died only a few months before that because Natalie did not want to talk about it. I mean, she was very polite, and she was wonderful, but she changed the subject. Like, she did not want to discuss Jim Backus. And I don't think there was animosity between them or anything. It might be just because he had died recently. She didn't want to talk about him, but she changed the subject. So that's the closest I have to anything personal. And of course, I've always loved Jim Backus because he was in Rebel Without a Cause, Jimmy Dean's father. And he was wonderful, gave a wonderful dramatic performance. Um, I know that, Margaret Hamilton, who played the Wicked Witch of the West, was originally a kindergarten teacher before she came to Hollywood in the movies, and little Jim Backus was one of her pupils. So that's a little bit of trivia there. And of course, Jim Backus we were talking about Joan Davis earlier. He co-starred with Joan Davis on I Married Joan. And I have read that Miss Davis was something of a bitch. She was very difficult, cantankerous, argumentative on the show, and Jim Backus could not stand her. Had to play her husband, had to do kissing scenes with her, but could not stand her. It's my understanding when they didn't have to be speaking, they didn't. He would speak to her only when it was professional, when they were working, or when they were actually on camera or rehearsing like that. But he would not speak to her otherwise. And I've read that one of the main reasons the show ended after only 3 years was because Jim Backus had a 3-year contract. And as soon as his contract was up, he left. And I guess they didn't want to recast the role. They didn't feel it'd be believable or whatever, or ratings. I'm sure it was a number of circumstances, but that contributed heavily to it. So that's pretty much my Jim Backus stories. Sorry, I don't have anything more personal than that. Um, yeah, imagine if Gilligan's Island is shut every week in Hawaii. It would have been probably too expensive to have done that. Gilligan's Island was done on a soundstage in here in LA in Studio City, Radford Studios. and it's the same studio where the Mary Tyler Moore show was done. And here's a piece of trivia for you: the soundstage where they shot the Mary Tyler Moore show with the studio audience and everything, had originally been the set for the soundstage for Gilligan's Island. So when you watch Mary Tyler Moore, remember there used to be palm trees and flowers and things there. That's where they shot it. And the lagoon was part of the back lot. They actually dug a big hole out and filled it up with water and trees and dressed it up. And that lagoon was there for a number of years. And it was only a few years ago they finally paved over it and put in a parking lot. Yes, they paved paradise and put in a parking lot, if you know that song. But yeah, most shows like that they do on sound stages. Otherwise, it just would not be cost effective, especially for television with limited budgets. It should be said that Miss Louise learned to love Ginger due to her daughter's love of her mother in the part. Yes, I have heard that. And I've heard that Tina Louise has mellowed a bit about Ginger. A bit. A bit. Like I understand she will autograph things, pictures of her as Ginger, but she does charge money to do it. I don't know what her fees are. I think it's on her website or something. And I mean, that's not an unreasonable thing. A lot of stars do that. A lot do. So I'm not impugning her for that in any way. But yeah, she'll embrace it to a point, that there is love for her there. But yeah, you can. I don't know. I don't know if it's TinaLouise.com or something. But I'm sure if you Google her name, it would come up if you're interested. What was that? Personality conflict, perhaps? Wait. Let's see. Let me go back here on the comments. Andy, why doesn't she want to talk about Gilligan's Island? Well, as I mentioned earlier on the show, it's a big sore spot for her. She felt she got tricked. She was led to believe she was going to be the star of the show, and turned out she was a supporting player. She was part of an ensemble, and she discovered that at the table read. Um, she always wanted to be a serious, dramatic actress. That was what she set out to be. And she thought Gilligan's Island was just very beneath her talents. And she also resented the show because it typecast her for many years. She couldn't get work. She couldn't get those dramatic roles she saw because everybody said, "Oh, you were Ginger on Gilligan's Island." So I think that's where a lot of the bitterness comes from. But she's 91 now. She's mellowed, and she's more open to the love from the fans. Let's see, where are the comments? They keep moving here, and then I have to go back. I wish I could freeze these in place. Let me go back here. Let's see. Oh, a whole bunch of comments. I've got to find where I left off. Joyce, I just read the entire chat. Everyone's behaving themselves. Yes, we have wonderful people here. Once in a while, there'll be someone a little incorrigible. And I've usually had someone as an administrator like Joyce block them. I think the one time I really got harassed on here was, because I say I avoid politics, but I showed a portrait that I had done of Kamala Harris, and I had a Trump supporter come on here and really start bullying me and making nasty comments, and we had to just block that person. Anyway, for the most part, all of you are just wonderful, and I really appreciate you very much. Oh, Joyce, you loved Gilligan's Island too. Aw. Yeah. And what was that word? Barbara Feldon said she was born sometime in the 20th century. Well, actually, Barbara Feldon, I think she's 92 now. I haven't seen any recent pictures of her, how she looks, but I've read that she still looks wonderful. And of course, again, our beloved 99. And I think Barbara Feldon was also someone who she wanted to have a more serious acting career, but she got typed as 99. But hey, I know scores of actors who never get that lucky, who never get a role like that, or for that matter, even singers who are lucky enough to have a great song. I'm acquainted with who was it who was telling me the story? Frida Payne. It was Frida Payne. who had a major number one hit around 1970, Band of Gold. Oh my god, Frida is still wonderful. Gorgeous voice. She's looks incredible, sings incredible still, but that was basically her one big hit song she ever had. But because of that one hit song, she's had a whole career, going on tours, performing on ships, performing in nightclubs. And she said to me once, "Thank God I have my song." So that's kind of like actors who get a role like Ginger or 99 or something. It's at least something that keeps the fans there. Whoa, you got to see the Catwoman, Chuck. The Catwoman. Which one do you mean? Do you mean Eartha Kitt? Do you mean Halle Berry? Do you mean Lee Merriweather? Who else played Catwoman? Juliet Prowse. There have been a lot of women who have played Catwoman. And Michelle Pfeiffer played Catwoman. Wendy, hey, can I throw out another great lady on a sitcom? Audra Lindley. Yes. Yes. Yes, our beloved Mrs. Roper. And, I don't know if any of you remember a show that only lasted 1 year, Bridget Loves Bernie. She played Meredith Baxter's mother on the show. She was wonderful on that. And that was an interesting show because that was the rare smash hit show that got canceled after 1 year. It was number 5 in the ratings. It was a big, big hit, but they were getting so much hate mail at the time because the premise of the show was about a Jewish man marrying a Catholic woman. Now today that's nothing, but in 1972 that was like considered controversial. So CBS just pulled the show. But Audra Lindley was on that. And before that, because my mother was a big soap opera fan and she loved the soap opera Another World. And Audra Lindley used to play the villain, Liz Matthews. Liz Matthews, my mother I hate that Liz Matthews. I hate her. She's horrible. But that's how good Audra Lindley was. That's actually a compliment to an actor when you're that believable, because she played a really awful, awful woman on that show. I was reading one actress on a soap opera who played a similar villain type character, and she was in the grocery store, and some woman in the dairy section opened up a carton of milk and poured it over her head and said, "Take that. That's for what you did to so and so on the show," or something. But people believe these characters. Audra Lindley was married to James Whitmore, and I met James Whitmore once. He was a splendid, splendid actor. Um, he was Oscar nominated for a one-man show. He did a one-man play about Harry Truman, and it got filmed and it was shown in movie theaters. And I think this is the only time that's ever happened where a film stage performance has gotten a Best Actor Oscar nomination. He was fabulous as Harry Truman, and I got to meet him. And the time I met him, he was doing Miracle Grow commercials. Actor does what they have to do. But he was married to Audra Lindley, and they used to have a small theater in, I think it was either Studio City or Burbank, and I went to a play there once. It was called uh, the Lindley Whitmore Theater, or was it the Whitmore Lindley Theater? I forget. It was their two names combined, but they formed it together. But she was funny as Mrs. Roper. And I understand when they were going to spin those characters off on their own show, she wanted to do it. It was Norman Fell who played her husband. Remember the sexless husband. She was the oversexed woman, and she had the husband who had zero interest. They kept that as a running joke on Three's Company. How they kept making jokes week after week after week and sustained it, but they did. And then they built a whole TV show on it. And anyway, he didn't want to do the show. He was like, "No, we're on a hit show right now. Please, please." I think it's the actor's insecurity. You got a good job. You're making big money. Don't leave. And she was like, come on, let's do it." And they got a deal with ABC that if the show got canceled after a year, they could go back to Three's Company. Well, what happened, the show lasted I read this just recently, the show lasted a year and a half, and because of that technicality, ABC would not let them go back on Three's Company. Yeah, they lost out on that one. And also they had hired at that point the wonderful Don Knotts to be the new landlord on the show. Now that was a casting coup, and I met Don Knotts. He was a lovely man, sweet as can be, just sweet and gentle. The time I met him, he was elderly, very frail, as you can imagine. He was a very thin man to begin with, so in old age he was a frail man, but heart of gold, lovely person. Anyway, that's Audra Lindley. Or did I like Wicked? Yes, I mentioned that earlier. I loved Wicked. I adored it. I was enthralled with it. Anastasia and I sat here on the couch, watched it on my big 65-inch flat screen and ultra 4K high definition. So it was as good as being in the movie theater. Um, it was one of those things where I had very high expectations to begin with, and it actually lived up to my expectations and exceeded them. And it was like when I saw Hamilton, when I had not seen that on stage either, but the Disney Channel during the pandemic lockdown showed a video recorded version of the show that had been authorized by Lin Manuel. He 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 knew because the this was when all the theaters all over the world were shut down. He knew there was literally no place on the planet Earth you could see Hamilton. So this version of the show they had video recorded, they were going to save it for a few more years. He decided to go ahead and put it on. He said, we need it now. This way people can still see the show. And I had very high expectations, too high. I thought, oh, I'm going to be disappointed. No, it's incredible. It's so incredibly good. If you haven't seen Hamilton on the Disney Channel, watch it. Watch Wicked. Highly recommend it. Now, I know some of you don't like musicals. I talk to people, oh, I hate film musicals, can't stand them. Or Broadway shows, and I haven't seen the stage show, but it's my understanding that it's quite faithful to the Broadway shows. So much so, there was no way they could fit it into one movie. That's why there's going to be a part 2 released this November. They just filmed the whole thing back to back, and they cut it in half. Let's see. Wait, Andy, they're coming for me? Run? What do you mean? Why are they coming for me? Who's coming for me? Anyway, Andy, your grandmother drove herself to the hospital just to have a heart attack. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know, was she experiencing the symptoms when she drove herself, or did it happen after she got there? She just knew something was wrong. Oh, well, did your grandmother survive this? Because I thought, I know this may sound horrible to say, but if you're going to have a heart attack, you couldn't be in a better place than in a hospital where you've got immediate medical attention, people to tend to you right in the moment. It might make the difference between life and death in a case like that. It's same thing with strokes. If you can get a person to the hospital very quickly, there are things that can be done to stop a lot of the brain damage and the adverse side effects if you can catch it very, very quickly. But I'm sorry that happened to your grandmother. What was this here, Chuck? I knew someone with a challenged child living in a group home with residents who never once had a family visit, not even birthday or Christmas. Oh, yeah. That's like, I was talking about this much earlier in the show about when I went to the nursing home to see my friend Bart, who had a stroke. I heard so many stories. People, their children just deserted them. Friends, family, never got a visit. It's terrible. It's a terrible thing to do to people. What was that, Wendy? I don't think she wanted the ambulance. I'm not sure. It's been a while since she's been gone. I'm sorry. Well, I'll tell you a little story about my grandmother. She was the one I've talked about before. She was on the farm in West Virginia. This is the grandmother She baked her own bread, milked cows, cured hams. We had a hen house. I was a little boy. We'd go out there at the basket and get the eggs. Uh, Amazing, amazing woman. And anyway, she died of a heart attack at 83. And my father was with her in the ambulance. And my father always maintained that it was she was so terrified, that woo, woo, the sound from the ambulance. So my father said that's what was scaring her, and he believed that's what killed her. She was having a heart attack, but she was so scared in that ambulance. Anyway, what happened happened. Um, let's see. Uh, yeah, and you know what else should be on Blu-ray? F Troop. I remember that show. Yeah. Well, who knows? Who knows? Maybe it'll come out. One of the things that impedes a lot of Blu-ray releases now is that unfortunately it's a dying format. Everything is switching over now to streaming. So that might be a reason why things are not being released with the volume they once were. It's like I Love Lucy just recently released the box set of the complete show. They had released the first two seasons about a decade ago, but unfortunately, they were extremely overpriced. I think CBS, whoever was behind it, was like thinking, well, this is I Love Lucy, the most loved show of all time. People will pay this. Well, people didn't. I think it was something like $135 for a season. It was just absurd. So the first 2 years came out, and then there was no season 3 released on Blu-ray. And then finally, this late last year, they released the box set, the whole show, including the hour-long episodes, and they made it affordable. I think $90 for the whole box set for Blu-ray, which is very, very reasonable when you're talking about something like 191, I think 191 episodes. What's that word? Let's not forget that since I Love Lucy had been filmed, they were able to distribute to print stations all over. Oh, yes, absolutely. That was the whole thinking behind it, shooting it on quality 35 millimeter film. The whole point, I've told this story many times on here about how television was live in those days, for the most part, live. And live shows were done from New York because they wanted the East Coast. They were thinking of sponsors. The biggest audiences were on the East Coast, so the sponsors wanted to target them, and they wanted the East Coast to get the best version of the show. So the East Coast would get this beautiful live broadcast, and then the West Coast would get these really crappy, kinescope films where they take a 16 millimeter camera, put the camera in front of a TV monitor and just film off the TV screen. And we've all seen kinescopes. They're on YouTube. That's why a lot of those 1950 shows look so awful. They look so primitive, but it's like the only version that exists of them is the kinescopes. But Lucy and Desi wanted to find another way they could film in front of an audience and make it look good. And of course, that's where they came up with the 3-camera technique and shooting on 35 millimeter film. And Desi gets way too much credit. Everybody says, oh, Desi Arnaz invented the 3-camera sitcom. He was on one of several people. And I've said before that the one who really deserved most of the credit was cinematographer Carl Freund, who was the Academy Award winning cinematographer of The Good Earth. He's considered one of the greatest cinematographers ever in Hollywood. And Lucy just wanted him because he made me look so pretty. And DuBarry was a lady. He photographed her when she came to MGM in gorgeous Technicolor. She looked spectacular. And Carl Freund was initially insulted. You want me to work for scale for a black and white television show? I have an Oscar. But he was so intrigued by the challenge. Because you see, the problem was, normally with motion picture filming, you do one camera at a time and you do your lights for that one camera. And if you have 3 cameras going, you're going to have your lighting. Carl Freund said, your shots aren't going to match because you're going to have the different lighting. But Carl Freund was so intrigued with the challenge of inventing a lighting system that would it would be like a flat lighting that would work on all 3 cameras, and that's what made it possible. So I think he's the one who really deserves the credit for that. But anyway, that's goes back to about the 35 millimeter film. And let's see, what are some other things here? Other comments. Um, oh yeah, that's a funny one. Gilligan imagining the Jack and the Beanstalk take off the skippers, the giant, the honeybees. Yeah. Oh, I saw a funny version of that, Kate. You know, Beyonce's "I'm a single lady, I'm a single lady." If if you like it, she put a ring on it. Well, they took the honeybees and dubbed that over it, and it worked. It almost matched their mouths. Even it looked like they were really singing that, and there's Mrs. Howell coming out and everything, and oh, it was really cute. Um Let's see, what are some other yeah, Blu-ray, other shows suggested for Blu-ray. Yeah, yeah, like All in the Family. Yeah, prob my opinion, one of the greatest situation comedies ever done. Um, yeah, let's see what else here. Let's see here. Let's see. I answered the question about why she didn't want to talk about Gilligan's Island. Uh, Andy, doesn't streaming cost? Well, Blu-rays cost too. You got to buy those. Now, actually, streaming is quite affordable when you look at all of the entertainment you have on there. Like typically, streaming channels, that have series on there, they will have all the seasons. Like for example, I just turned a friend on to The Crown, which I love that. And the box set, Blu-ray box set on Amazon, I think is like $90 or something right now. I can't remember. And my friend was saying, well, that's too much money. And I said, well, why don't you just subscribe to Netflix? It's like 20 something a month, and you can just watch the entire show that way and watch it a lot cheaper. And the quality is beautiful. Um, Andy, do they still have nursing homes in California for celebrities? Well, they still have. I know the motion picture retirement home in Woodland Hills, which has been around since the 1930s. I've never been to it, but I understand it's extremely nice. You know, I used to be acquainted with the actor Ken Berry. Someone was asking about F Troop, and he said that that was his intention to retire to the motion picture retirement home. He said, it's really nice there, nice, almost like little condominiums and nice food and activities and things. And also because it's a place for entertainers, it's a place you can be with your peers, fellow movie stars, fellow television stars, exchange stories. If you're familiar with Norma Shearer, who was she became forgotten about, but she was one of the biggest stars of the 1930s. She was up there with Harlow and Gable and Crawford. They were remembered. She wasn't. But anyway, Norma Shearer spent her final years in the motion picture retirement home in Woodland Hills. Um, let's see. Oh, a cute movie about assisted living is Queen Bees. It's one of the streaming channels, might be Netflix. I can't remember. These things jump around all over the place, but it's Ellen Burstyn and Anne Margaret and Jane Curtin and James Caan. Really good cast. I enjoyed that. It was fun. Let's see. What are some other comments here? Oh my gosh, I've been on here almost 2 hours. I got to get off here in a moment. I've enjoyed the time with you, but I've got to work on some things. I'm just looking at the comments real quick here. Oh darn this! These comments slip. It went up, and now I got to scroll it back down again. Here we go. Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, at least one or two of the Three Stooges were there at the motion picture retirement home. Well, Ward, that's only partially true about the Kinescope films, because there are mint condition, pristine kinescope films in existence, and they still look bad. The reason they look so bad is because when you're putting a camera on a TV monitor, it's going to photograph really flat and very grainy. 16 millimeter film in itself is very grainy. That was another reason for having 35 millimeter film, much clearer picture. So yeah, they just look like crap to begin with. Oh yeah, I knew that about Carl Freund. Yeah, Metropolis. Yeah, he was quite the genius. He was quite innovative, very inventive. You're right that about he invented a number of camera effects. That's why it appealed to him so much, that challenge of inventing that lighting system. Because his own words to Desi Arnaz were, "This is impossible. It can't be done." And then it was like 2 days later, he got the phone call from Carl Freund. Carl Freund couldn't rest. He couldn't stop. It was so exciting to him to do the impossible, to find a way to make it work, and he did. So I think that's how he came up with a lot of those wonderful camera effects. Yeah, and of course he came from Germany. There were so many creative geniuses who were run out of Nazi Germany and they sought refuge in America. Like Billy Wilder, for example, came here because he was run out of Nazi Germany. Let's see, where's some other comments here. Oh, I know you were Facebook friends with Larry Storch. Yeah, he lived to be in his 90s. Oh, he sent you an autograph picture. That's really sweet. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah. Oh, yeah, he lived to be 99 and a half. Dying hours after celebrating his 99 and a half birthday. Now, that's a way to go out. I read that about Josephine Baker. Now, she didn't live that long, of course, but as I understand it, it was a big, big champagne party held for her to celebrate her 50 years in show business. Even Princess Grace was there in attendance. And the story goes Josephine Baker just drank a lot of champagne, had a fabulous time, went home, went to sleep, and passed away in her sleep that night. But what a way to go. Have a big party on the last night of your life. Um, I even made that joke about, not kind of a joke and not a joke, about Evelyn Keyes, who was my friend. Evelyn Keyes died on the 4th of July. And I said this to friends. I said, that's so Evelyn. Because she knew how to live big, celebrate life. And I thought, how appropriate for Evelyn, if we can choose when we leave this earth, to leave on a day of fireworks up in the sky, like a big fireworks send off across the nation. That, trust me, that was who Evelyn Keyes was. I always thought it was so appropriate. I don't know if you've seen, so would you like to bring it up again? If you've seen the movie Sudden Death with oh, you mean Claude Van Damme in it? Lindley plays a chef's wife in the movie. No, I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that. Now, I did have a friend who, this was a long time ago, he was Jean-Claude Van Damme's stand-in. But it was a movie, and I forget what it was called, but he played twins. And when you're in a movie and you're playing twins, you've got to have a stand-in who looks like you, at least from the side and from the back, similar build and coloring and hair and stuff, which my friend was. And so he filmed for several months and he played the twin brother when they were doing the shots from where it'd be him talking to his brother from the back or something. And he was pretty chummy with Jean-Claude for a while. And then he said, after and Jean-Claude was saying, oh, I'm going to use you in more movies and I'll get you work as an actor. I'll help you out. And after the movie came out, he said he never heard from him again. Dropped him cold. Oh, well. Let's see. Where's some other comments here? Billy Wilder. Yeah, nobody's perfect. In fact, that's on his tombstone. He's buried in the same cemetery in Westwood where Marilyn Monroe is, and a number of celebrities. And his tombstone says, I'm a writer, ... but nobody's perfect. It's like Mel Blanc. That's all, folks. That's on his tombstone. Oh, yeah, George Burns used to do his birthday specials. He had such a rebirth in his career, such a rebirth. I mean, after it looked like it was over for him, when Gracie was gone. In fact, Gracie retired a few years before she passed away, and George Burns' career floundered for a while. And after she was dead, he did some guest appearances and things, but it was just never the same. And then in the 70s, he got that role in Neil Simon's The Sunshine Boys with Walter Matthau. It was originally supposed to have been Jack Benny's role. Jack Benny died. He and Jack were best friends, and it fell to George Burns, and George Burns won an Oscar. And just all of a sudden, he became a big star again. He was doing all the TV specials, and then he had the Oh God movies and things. It was quite something. And he worked up pretty close to his turning 100. I think he made one last appearance. He was about 98 or so. And it's my understanding his son said when he was 99 or 100, he had a bad fall in his shower, his bathtub, and he hit his head, and he was never the same after that. But he made it to 100. And I've been to the grave where George and Gracie are interred. I go there. I love to visit these cemeteries in the stars, but George and Gracie always have meant a lot to me, and I stop by and pay respects to them. And it's just always something when you see the years of their birth and death, and you see that, yeah, George Burns made it 100 years. And I've told the story about how on their grave it says Allen and Burns. And George Burns gave an interview, and he said that's what it was going to say. He said she had top billing in life, but in eternity. No, no, no. He said, I had top billing in our career, but in eternity, she will have top billing. Very sweet. Oh yeah, Jack Benny died at the age of 39. Yeah, that was his big joke. Yeah, and he was, I think, about 80. I think he was 80 actually when he died. He had diabetes, and I read, his book. His wife Mary wrote a book, and she said they didn't tell Jack that he was dying. I think he had cancer. He was dying. He had diabetes. He was dying, but apparently he was still comfortable. So Mary saw to it that his last days were happy. Like as a diabetic, he wasn't supposed to be eating desserts and things. Well, suddenly she started serving him ice cream and cakes and pies and cookies. And Jack would say, I thought I wasn't allowed to have this. But he was so trusting. He said, if you say it's okay, then I guess it's okay. But Mary wanted him to be happy his final days. I think I told that story about my Cocker Spaniel when I found out she was dying of cancer. And I did something like that because I always had her on a perpetual diet. The dog would eat anything, and she was always battling weight, and she was so disappointed. And I'd fill her dog dish up like 3/4 of the way, and she'd look at me like, "Is that all there is?" But when I learned she was dying, and she had about 2 months, and she wasn't in pain, she wasn't suffering. I could see that. I watched her carefully, but I told the story. I I let her eat cheeseburgers, I gave her ice cream, I gave her cake, and that dog was so happy. It was so much fun to see her happy like that toward the end. Let's see. What was it? Oh, speaking of getting a picture, I'm sorry, was email. I got pictures. Do you remember when? Yeah, autograph pictures. There are a lot of people, a lot of celebrities who will sign their own autographs, not secretarial. And I was able to find out from Al Morley who a lot of the people were, like Betty Davis. You wrote Betty Davis, she would sign it. Joan Crawford, Mae West, they always signed their own things. They were very good to their fans. I forget who some of the others. Gene Kelly, Jimmy Stewart, they would sign for themselves. But I'm not sure about Bob Hope. But Bob Hope, and I've always found it very interesting about Bob Hope because he, he basically retired by the time he was about 93 or so. I don't think he could work anymore. And accounts I've heard, he was stone deaf. That was one of the problems. Like even with hearing aids, he could barely hear anything anymore, and his vision was going. And yeah, I think he did a Walmart commercial or something, as was mentioned by Andy. But that was about it. But he was once one of the biggest stars in the world, and it was very interesting. Once he retired, I watched him quickly become forgotten. He I don't think I've ever seen anyone fade into obscurity as quick as Bob Hope. And then now, he's another one, lived to be 100, and he died, I think, about 20 years ago. And he is just, let's face it, except for older people, he's largely forgotten about, and younger generations have no idea who Bob Hope is. So much so, there's an airport in Burbank, the Bob Hope Airport, and yes, obviously named in his honor. And I read in the LA Times like 2 years ago, they were seriously considering changing the name of the airport because people had no idea who Bob Hope was. It didn't mean anything to most people, and people were having trouble remembering even the name of the airport or something. It was some ridiculous reason, and thankfully they didn't change the name of the airport. It's still Bob Hope Airport. Wait, did he go to court when people thought he was dead, but he wasn't? I don't know who are you talking about there. I don't know who that is. But that's a terrible thing to have people report you're dead and you're not. No. There are stories like Elizabeth Taylor. Um, she came close to death several times, and there's the story in 1960, the year she got her Academy Award. 2 weeks beforehand, she nearly died from pneumonia. They had to do a tracheotomy on her, but I think she was pronounced dead for a few minutes and then brought back. Anyway, she laughingly told the story of how she read her own obituary. The newspapers already went to press with her obituaries, and she got to read them. Can you imagine? That would be surrealistic, and it would be a bit ominous. I don't know if I'd want that experience. But anyway, I've been on here. It is 7:14 my time here in California. I've been on well over 2 hours. I think this has turned out to be one of the longest shows I've ever done, and I do need to move on. I've got to get some work done tonight. But did anybody have a final question or comment before I sign out? I love being here with all of you. I always have an idea in my head, some things that I can talk about, and then I find I never get around to even telling those stories because you guys help me out and you guide me where to go, and I just tuck those away for another time. One of those times where I'm ever here and I suddenly blank out like a deer with like my eyes like a deer in the headlights. Like, what do I talk about? And I'll go, oh yeah, I can tell this story. But anyway, thank you all for being here. It means a lot to me. I appreciate you all very, very much. I'll be here same time next week, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. Tuesdays, I do a show called Taco Tuesdays with the wonderful Dr. Whimsy Anderson on her channel, The Oracle of Whimsy. Same thing, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And that's, of course, the show where we get into more current events, politics, that type of thing. And I'm also there to give great support to my dear, dear friend. She's an amazing woman, and it's my pride and joy to work for her in real life and with her on her show. So that's where I'll be tomorrow if you want to check it out. So I'm going to say good night for now, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.